Gaming in BS, episode 220, coming to you Wednesday, December something, 2018. Welcome to Gaming in BS, a tabletop RPG podcast. I'm Sean.
And I'm Brett. Welcome to the show. Welcome back. For those who've been with us before, good to have everybody here, gathered around the old campfire. Starting to get cold, Sean. It was 14 degrees when I got up this morning.
Yeah?
I mean, that was outside, not like in my house. So, you know how many people at work, when I say, yeah, it was 14 degrees at home, I literally have people at work going, in your house? I'm like, did you fucking grow up in Wisconsin? How do you not know I mean outside? 3 people did that to me today. And the first person, I'm like, oh, you're being funny. No, they weren't. They really weren't being funny.
So it wasn't in your house is what you're saying?
I feel sad for people like that. Anyway, let's see here. Anything crazy happened to you? You didn't almost drown or anything like that? You didn't
nothing.
Your dog didn't jump off a cliff? You had to parasail to save it or something crazy?
No, this week has been relatively low key.
That's good.
Yeah, I've actually had a day off here and there. I like it.
Well, I think we can say, as the subject of a quasi-PSA, is that if, in your resume world, we're looking for jobs and so forth, if you burn the bridge behind you, that may not be a good idea. Because someday, somehow, some way, you might need a guy like Sean to help you find that job you need. So don't... Sometimes people I hear around me go, fucking recruiters. I would say, hey, those recruiters, they get me jobs, man. Don't hate on these people.
Oh man, I don't want to go into business.
No, I'm just saying, just don't. If you're gonna burn the bridge, at least leave a little bit behind, and don't salt the earth behind you. Don't do it.
Just don't.
It's a bad idea. Anyway, so shall we?
Yeah, that's a whole topic for another
That's a
podcast.
different podcast, different show. Anyway, in the PSA matter of things. So, let's see. Do announcement-wise, so December 18th. You know what that day is, Sean?
What is December 18th? Wait, Brett. Wait. Hold on.
You got something? Avalon Kickstarter is live, December 18th.
I need a more robust applause because that seemed.
I'll tell you what. That's probably the number of people like, yay. Yo, shut up. Once this is done, maybe he will stop fucking talking about that.
No,
but anyway,
that's fantastic, Brett. And
I'm very pleased.
And in honor of that, you gave a little sneak to some people, right?
Yes, on our patronage, in the spirit of making sure our patrons get a chance to see stuff before other people, I had Matt Morrow from, he's done a lot of work from Code Designs, and hell of an artist. He did a quick mock-up sketch for the Lamplighters, and first go, I'm like, fuck me, he damn near nailed it with 2 tweaks. I'm like, there it is, that's a Lamplighter. And then he produced this wonderful city scene, all black and white, just the way I like it, and it was really cool. So I shared that out. So as I get bits and pieces like that, as things start to come through, I'll do my damnedest to share that. And another thing, if you're interested, I know not everybody are actual play podcast folks that listen to us, but if you are interested in Avalon at all, one of the things that Chris Sinizak is doing on Misdirect Mark is he's re-releasing the Streets of Avalon podcast that we did the actual play. And in the re-release, in episode 2, he read from the book, the forthcoming book. He read a couple excerpts. He's going to do that in a couple more of them going forward, just to give teasers like, hey, this is in the book, hey, this text is there, and so on, which I think is pretty freaking cool. So that was pretty nice. So anyway, December 18th. Sean, I think I've got them convinced to put a $2,000 goal out there because Sean promised to pledge at the highest level possible. So I think we got this. I think we got him. Anyway, I'm excited. Scared, excited, nervous, the whole bit, but it'll be cool. It'll be a lot of coolness.
So, yeah. So you posted that one to Patreon. Are you going to post it publicly? That one that you sent?
What I'll probably do is I'll throw it out on what's left of G+, our Facebook group, and over on MeWe, I'll give it to listeners and so on. And once it's out there, then my hope is that listeners will see it, go, wow, this is really cool, and then tell their friends type of thing. because I
And
don't
then
want to.
there's another one coming.
Yes. Yep. I've got more stuff, more goodies. So
More sneaky sneaks.
that's the idea.
So if you're a patron, even at a dollar level, the rule for our patron is anybody who's a patron at any level, no matter what we put out there, is always going to have sneaky peek first.
That's the idea. Yeah.
And but not everything will go out to the public, but if anything that we will try to get out there. But if you want, to see it a week or whatever beforehand, that's the way to do it.
Once the other piece is once the Kickstarter's live, I just don't want to lose this. If people have questions about it, like, hey, once it's live, if somebody doesn't understand the level, I mean, I've seen it and I know what Chris, Phil, and the guys at Encoder are going to do with us here. It's going to be pretty straightforward. It should be very easy to understand and so forth. But I also know the first time I went into a Kickstarter, I went, I want to get in on this thing. This seems cool. And I'd never done it before. And for some bizarre reason, you're like, hey, I want to support this Brett guy. I think this is cool, and I'd like to try Kickstarter for the first time. If you do have questions, that's part of what Encoder Designs and I are going to try to do through that, is people are going to ask questions and try to help people make sure that they understand what they get, all that good stuff. It should be very self-explanatory, but of course, somebody's going to read it and say, are you sure? And we want to make sure that we're helping people out. So when it goes live, any questions, of course, hit us up with it.
Yes.
Cool. I'm excited.
Cool. Yeah. What else? What do we got?
Oh, other things I'm excited about. Oh, evercon.org. First weekend in January. If you do not have your events in yet and you plan to run stuff, get them in before December 16th, 2018, because after that, we'll have to shut off our event registration. Also, get your discounted weekend badges. We're talking $35 for the weekend. That is it. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, $35 in the door all the time. Cool stuff. Do that. evercon.org. Check that out if you have not already. What have you got, man?
If you join our email list for the month of December 2018, you'll be entered to win a set of dice from Awesome Dice. So we'll randomly choose. For those that have already submitted their email or they're a current patron of ours, you will automatically be entered. So we'll be picking straight from our email list from Awesome Dice. So every month we will be giving a set of dice away.
Holy crap.
And now,
how'd you swing this, dude? Who do you know?
Brandon, man. Brandon at Awesome Dice. He's like, hey, I want to do this. So he's one of the new owners there, I think, and see. So he's kind of like, hey, I want to do this. Are you open to do it? And I said, sure. Why don't we do this? So now the only caveat is he can't ship to certain countries because it's just not economical for him to ship dice that probably costs like $30, $40, $50 to get through customs.
Oh my God! You talk to guys. I mean, you grab Glenn Seal, Monkey Blood Designs, and talked about shipping Midland stuff. It can be a pain,
right.
Huge pain, huge cost. Yeah. So what are our limitations on shipping, Sean?
So we're going to be shipping only to U.S., Canada, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, which covers quite a bit of ground considering.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're really huge in the Scandinavian countries or the Middle East by any means, but you never know.
Well, I'll tell you, when I was on, Chad had me on Dead Games, right?
Yep.
And we talked Middle Earth role playing.
Yep.
And he hits me up on Facebook and says, "Hey, Brett, you're big in Turkey." I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, we had like 5 downloads in Turkey." I'm like, "Really?" He said, "I'm positive there's a military base somewhere over there, and that's who pulled it down." It was just hilarious. Anyway.
I don't know. Yeah. Sign up to our email, go to gamingnbs.com. If you're on the website desktop version, it's on the right-hand side. You just put in your first name and email address. If it's on the mobile device, you just scroll down a few and it'll be there. And again, we will keep going. So the next month we'll give another set of dice away. I think we're doing this for, I want to say something like 6 months.
Good
maybe?
Lord.
So 7 sets of dice from Awesome Dice. We want to thank them for doing that and giving you a little incentive to drop your email on our email list.
And that is Awesome Dice, all one word, awesomedice.com.
Yeah, Awesome Dice.
If you want to check those folks out.
Yep.
Very cool. Very generous of them, too. That's very nice.
Yeah, so that's... And then we also have, which I did not also post, we are on Reddit, which I haven't dinked around on Reddit for a long time.
My buddy Lenny said Reddit is like one of his favorite places to go. I've toyed with being on Reddit, but I've not done much there. So now we're going to have to do Reddit stuff.
Right. Now, I thought it would be awesome just to get on there and post die roll stuff. So stuff we find, we don't have a subreddit because we don't have enough karma. We haven't been on there for 30 days.
Gotcha.
So once you get that, then you can post to your subreddit. So I was thinking, well, what better way to do die rolls and submit stuff kind of Google Plus-y? I mean, people are like, no, it's nothing like Google Plus. I get the differences, but nonetheless, you post articles, you vote them up, vote them down, vote them all around. But,
it's a good place for that type of data to get stored and shared. So that's not a bad idea, man.
Yeah. So we will post a link to our Reddit in the show notes. And if you are a Redditor, then feel free to comment in there and submit things.
It's like after 4 years of doing the show, we're growing right the fuck up.
We're doing a few things around here.
Changing it up, moving it.
Yeah. Oh, and I didn't mention, but Brett hinted at it. So patrons are probably aware of this. And I posted it out on Twitter and Facebook. I don't know if I hit Google Plus because Google Plus is sunsetting in April, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't gotten the word.
Yeah.
If we're doing a program kind of schedule where we have a spreadsheet where we have the episodes listed and then the subject matter and if there's a guest and any particular notes. So we're trying to keep up with that well in advance, and we're giving all patrons access to that. So if you want to know what we're talking about next week, it's there. If you want to know what we're talking about in 5 weeks and it's on the spreadsheet, you can see that. That's always subject to change because Brett and I will change that at the drop of a dime. But nonetheless, you can see what's coming from us. And if you want to even suggest the topic, that's fine. We're always open to that.
And when you see the topic, you're like, I want to know more about this. Hey, here's a good point. If I were you, I'd check this out. If you have hints, things, questions that you'd like to see addressed on the topic that you think is coming, throw it at us. And that's also a good way to kind of vote the topic up and make sure it sticks, if you will. Because if we know that people are interested in hearing about that topic, it's much more likely to stick. Not that it won't stick anyway, but hey, if we're like, wow, 5 people said they really want to hear about it, well, shit, that's a damn good reason to do it.
Yeah, you think we were on like episode 5.
You'd think so.
Some of these updates. So if you want to know what's coming.
It's been like 4 years, and we've pretty much stayed the course, so we've made a couple changes, and now this is like the largest change we've had. Our format pretty much hasn't changed in forever.
That's true.
But hey.
And we're not maybe something to train. Maybe something to check out. I don't know.
I don't like that kind of change.
It's baby steps. We don't want to throw Brad off.
No, I'll get all upset about that.
People, you know how people love change.
Exactly.
Changes.
Shall we random encounter it up?
Pull off YouTube. Yeah, let's get a.
Thank you.
Random encounters. So it's the segment where we field emails, voicemails, comments from social media. I will hit the first 2, and Brett can read the third one.
You got it.
So Blake Ryan from Twitter, in regards to our last episode on aquatic adventures, seafaring adventures, he actually points out Rich Howard's posts on Tribality for aquatic RPG inspiration. So Rich Howard he's out there. He's somebody to follow on the tweets. And so if you know him, great. But we will link to his blog posts on Tribality because he does a pretty extensive, post on aquatic RPGs. So thanks, Blake, for doing that. Thanks, Rich, for producing it. Derek Pennycuff, who is local to Wisconsin, says to check out 50 Fathoms for more aquatic goodness.
50 Fathoms. I knew that one. It didn't come to me. God dang it.
That's Savage Worlds based.
Yes.
So it can be plot point or campaign. Plot point seems very, it's more brief. So it's here's what you're going to be doing, and then you kind of go and do it. So 50 Fathoms, he just mentioned that. John Steve, we're not neglecting you either, John. So he also mentioned MeWe 50 Fathoms. So we want to give props to those guys for pointing that out. Otherwise, Brett, you got Mike D's email?
Yes, let me get that up here. Mike D. A funny story about Waterborne Adventures. In first edition Warhammer Fantasy, I played a homebrew dwarf Ironbreaker who practically lived in his armor. That character was no more after our ship was boarded by pirates. I stood on the gangplank and fought off nearly a dozen pirates until a couple of mistakes on my part caused me to lose my balance and fall overboard. Needless to say, dwarves in heavy armor don't swim so well. Waterborne Adventures can be just as entertaining as regular adventures. The DM just needs to ensure they're providing what the players are looking for. In D&D, for instance, there's often a lot of overland travel that is hand-waved unless something important happens. This should realistically be no different if the adventure takes place in the water, as you mentioned. You mentioned bad weather for ships, but bad weather for a caravan on land can almost be as dangerous, although with less risk of drowning as in the ocean. I think that a lot of headache and apprehension comes from the belief that things have to be different because it's on a ship as opposed to a wagon. I'm slightly disappointed that you didn't mention the Polaris RPG. It's designed around Waterborne Adventures, although it's a more futuristic post-apocalyptic setting. I played it a couple times. It's a lot of fun to play. It kind of treats the water as an ever-present danger that only really impacts the characters when things go wrong. We'll have a link in the show notes to polaris-rpg.com. Mike, man, I did not even know about that game, so thank you very much for bringing it up. This is one of the reasons why I love our community, man. Somebody out there's like, oh, you've never heard of this game? I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that game existed. And then you look at it and go, shit, that looks like a really cool game. So thanks, man. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much.
I think Mike's got a pretty good perspective there, thinking that a waterborne adventure has to be this crazy different thing than land. I think there's wisdom in there, Mike. So thank you. That was good stuff.
Yes.
All right. Was that it?
That was it for random encounters. Let's get into the main topic.
Lay it on me.
Okay, so this week, just to hit this up quick, Daniel G dropped us a note on Facebook. So he and I met at GameholeCon. He says, my biggest thing, so this is in regards to the topic, which we are going to talk about organized play. He says, my biggest thing about being a new to organized play was not knowing where to start and what legal way to make a character.
Ah, okay. The whole, boy, that looks interesting, but how the hell do I break into that?
Right. Kojo points out, Brett, you want to read Kojo?
Yeah, Kojo pointed out Goodman Games Road Crew games. Goodman Games gives out swag to those that run DCC and MCC. So it's Dungeon Crawl Classics and Mutant Crawl Classics,
right,
respectively.
Now, my comment on that was also Third Eye Games has Oracle's program.
Correct. Yep,
okay.
Absolutely. Yep. So Eloy Lasanta and those folks have the Oracle's program. So that's interesting because it's organized play to a point. When we think organized play, at least when Brett thinks organized play, I think of something different than supported play. But anyway, carry on, sir.
Right. So that is, I think, something we want to kind of nail down a little bit. And we'll have links to Goodman Games' Road Crew, which he provided. But I also wanted to make note that there's other, like Third Eye Games has that as well. However, do we consider that something as organized play?
Well, Sean, how would you define organized play? I guess this is one of those pieces where we say, oh, it's not quite like OSR, right, where we can hash it back and forth. But when you hear the term organized play, what does it bring to mind to you?
First of all, I think if you work in the corporate world and you are familiar with the word governance, I would have to say that it probably directly applies. If you were to say, what is governance in the role-playing game hobby, I would have to say that organized play is a perfect example of what governance is. Would you disagree with that, Brett?
I don't know enough about organized play. Theoretically, I would say absolutely, yes. A governing body of people that will tell you you're doing it wrong.
So that's Brett's encounter with governance in the corporate world.
So I'm telling you, if you told me that, it would go, fuck, I'm not doing that. I'm not playing organized play if that's it.
So not, because it is not very sexy to say that it's governance.
No, it's not. It makes me think, hell, just, all right, we're done here. I'll go home. No, thank you. I prefer not to.
to back up what I'm saying is relates to governance is that there is usually some type of authority that kind of dictates the organized play for that particular game.
So it's organized, and I get you. Okay, so when you're saying governance, you're saying there's an organization behind it that helps provide structure.
Correct.
That
Yes.
it provides structure, which will allow for as universal of an experience as possible for everyone involved.
You know, Brett, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, I mean, because honestly, that jokes aside, that's the idea of like project governance, right? So I live in a PM-driven world quite often in my IT space, and one of the reasons you try to have standards and so forth is for that exact reason. So that makes sense. You have a universal experience for everybody involved. See, that's where if we look at that, and I like that, I would say that supported games are different than actual play. Your Goodman games, for example, a lot of cool road crew stuff. You could run Sailors on the Starless Sea. You could run, what is it? There's Jewels of the Carnifex. All these really cool Goodman games, DCC adventures. You could run some really cool stuff. Brandolin Red, all these great ones. And they're supporting you, but they are not providing governance around the organization of that play. They're not saying, hey, Sean and Brett, when you run Jewels of the Carnifex, it's for these characters that are built with these particular stats. One, because Goodman Games embraces the 3d6 down the line, and it doesn't have the stability, perhaps stability is the wrong word, but it doesn't have the consistency or the repeatability that some of the organized play does, especially Adventures League, from what I understand. It's a little more, the nature of that game is it has its gonzo components and so on, and it's more like, hey, if you play Jewels of the Carnifex, here's the adventure, have a good time with it. They want to make sure people have fun. However that judge for the game runs it, however the players go at it, if you don't get all the way through, it's a TPK. People playing DCC are like, fuck yeah, that was awesome, we all died. You know, the people who are into it don't care. Where, to my knowledge, when I've talked to folks who play AL, Adventures League for WotC, they don't expect, they will be a little crabby if there is a TPK. Sean, have you played Adventures League? I mean, that's the big 600-pound gorilla, right, for organized play.
So it is, and I don't want to focus solely on AL because I know a lot of people are like, can you talk about any organized plays other than D&D? And we will to some degree, but not a ton.
The interesting thing about it, though, is I'm interested in what you know about it, your experiences with it, and then bouncing other things off it. Because Cassium used to have, I'm going to do a quick check while you're talking, but they had a lot of different, in Shadowrun, your buddy runs that stuff. Jimmy runs Shadowrun organized play. So what's been your experience with Adventures League?
I don't usually play too much Adventurers League in the, I would say, this is not a specific term, but I don't play a lot in an open format. So I don't go to a game store and go and play an organized play on a game night. So every Thursday in Madison, they're running Adventurers League on the east side, and I think they run it on the west side and whatever, different nights. We have played organized play format at my buddy Doc's house. So you can do that in quite a few other ones. So you can run or play in or participate in an organized play game where it's at home and not a convention or a game day or a game night or what have you. You with me?
Yeah, I'm in.
Brett's still found he's getting his stuff together.
No, I'm with you. I like that's actually an interesting component is that organized play can be done with your home group.
Yes.
And I know talking to Alex Kammer, when he and Josh Hoyt and some of the guys from the Gamehole crew, when they had time and they were getting into a little bit, they went to cons to play AL games as a group because a lot of times they didn't all get to play together. One of them was a game master. It was a good opportunity for them to play together as a team and then go to these tables as such. But as you've told me before, you and Doc and Jimmy and the boys, you'll play them at home, which is interesting because you can then take that character and it's portable to a convention game, correct?
That's correct. And that would be the big reason we would do it because we would know a convention's coming up and some of the members of the group will want to participate in Adventurers League or organized play at the convention. They may not want to run a character that's first level. They may want to we call it leveling up the tune. So we want to level our tune up. We want to level up the tune. And so in order to do that, we run it at home, go through a few adventures, get a few experience points, level them up. And then when we get to the convention, we can play at a higher tier.
Okay.
Right? Or a higher level adventure, scaled adventure.
And the adventures, I mean, not only from tiers and scales perspective, but they're geared towards how it rewards you is universal. The game master does not have, to my knowledge, the freedom to say you get a +3 sword instead of a +1. Everybody gets X or whatever. It's a package within AL. Am I correct?
It is, and again, not to really get on AL specifically but it is, again, what Brett said is the 600-pound gorilla. With organized play, so let's back up a second, Brett. So organized play really goes back to the days of the RPGA. Remember that, Brett?
Oh, fuck yeah, man. You got Dragon Magazine back in the day, the RPGA, the Role Playing Game Association. Yes.
Right. You a member? Are you a member, Brett?
I was not. It was one of those things I always wanted to do when I was a kid, but I didn't. I had no money. If I could afford a Dragon Magazine at the time, I was happy as a clam. But when you looked at like the Slave Lords campaigns,
yeah.
If you look at some of the classic old school adventures modules, as we called them back in the day, they were modules sold that were used in convention plays tournaments. You actually played tournaments. And I don't know enough about the RPGA to know if they actually had rules around how you progressed or whatever, or how tournaments were awarded and so on for play, but it's stricter now. I mean, Pathfinder, the Pathfinder Society that Paizo puts out, has some pretty strict rules, to my understanding, from talking to guys like Eric Frankhouse and so on, around how their games run in the society environment and so on. So
the RPGA was, I think, put into place around, and I could be mistaken, don't quote me this, I think I found it online, was 1987, and they came out with C6, which it was like launched as a module. Like it's no adventure, it's just the rules of the RPGA on how it outlines how to design, run, and judge tournaments.
This was when you had Polyhedron Magazine, which was the magazine for the RPGA as well.
I've got a lot of issues of Polyhedron.
I used to, because a buddy of mine lent them to me. I do not have them anymore.
You can get them on drive-thru now.
Oh, sweet. Sometimes it's neat just from a historical perspective.
Yeah, so I'll have to double check and see. I wonder if I can get any money for those things. But anyways, you'd go to a con, and if you registered for an RPGA event, it was kind of quote-unquote sanctioned, and you would compete as part of that event. So it would be maybe multiple rounds. There were typically pre-generated characters, because back in those days, there wasn't any really standard. So they would just automatically create the pre-gens.
Yeah, pre-gens were the way to go. Yeah,
because everybody back then, if you sat at an AD&D table, man, you didn't know what you're getting into, because everybody house ruled everything.
Well, not only did you house rule it, but because it would be like now, if I played a 5e game and you came to my game, you said, hey, I've got my characters, I've been a Forgotten Realms guy, I bring him in, and you're like, I'm sorry, I don't allow tieflings in Avalon. You'd be like, well, but this is my character, how come I can't play in your world? You know, that type of thing happened.
Right.
So if you're going to do anything organized like that, you'd have to, at the time, the tools in the toolbox would be like pre-gens. Boom, that problem solved. Right. Equal playing field from a character's magic items and spells and stats and hit points. Everybody's got the same gear.
Right. So that's where it kind of came out of, and then it morphed. As a matter of fact, RPGA, for a long time, before AL was kind of the organized play organization from, I think it transferred from TSR to Wizards, and they still used RPGA up until like 3.0 days.
Yeah, so from taking a quick look at some notes I put down around the RPGA. So I think Frank Mensner started it back in 80s, like 1980. And then Wizards, if I'm reading this correctly, grabbed it in 97. And then at that point, one of the things that Wizards brought in was the Living City concept of Raven's Bluff.
That's right, yes.
And there was Living Greyhawk at one point later on. And I love this little piece I'm reading here. The RPGA from 2000 to 2008, the RPG had members on all continents of the world except Antarctica. That's
crazy.
I've heard that statement before, and it always makes me smile when I read it.
So with organized play, going back to governance and kind of speeding it up to modern day, and Brett introduces the living, quote unquote, the living campaign.
Mm-hmm.
That is a facet of organized play. So Brett, how do you define a living campaign?
Oof.
In your own words, Brett.
So I think the idea behind a living campaign is that you would run a season of adventures through an organized play concept. And then based on what occurs during that season of adventure, the game rule changes based on what occurs. So if you were in Greyhawk, if there was an entire adventure series in Farundi and something horrible happened, the landscape of Greyhawk would be forever changed. If something happened in the realms, you would change that. I think, interesting enough, the living campaign concept, I believe Legend of the Five Rings card game, at the point when John Wick used to be a writer for that, Matt Colville has a video on this, like the greatest story ever told, and he talks about that campaign. It was a collectible, tradable card game, and what would happen at a tournament, they would do things that would change the setting, or this rule would be invalid, or people would come together and say, hey, we're going to forfeit to each other, and they would do crazy-ass things at events, at tournaments, at Gen Con, and so on. So that was another approach to it. But anyway, point being is that a living campaign would be like if I was running Avalon in such a sense, somebody has to collect the stuff that occurred, however it's documented, and say, here's season 2 for this adventure series. And this is what has changed based on these adventures that, if there were 5 adventures in a season, based on the outcomes of these 5 adventures, here's how the world has changed. Go at it. Next type of thing. That's my understanding of a living campaign.
Yeah, no, I think that's not far off the mark by any means. I think that's pretty decent.
And I think that's a hell of a lot fucking harder than it sounds.
Yeah, to make that happen, certainly.
And to make it scale. Like,
sure.
If I was running, I'm picking Avalon because it's top of mind for me, obviously, right now. But if I was running such a thing with 5 different gaming groups, that could be a goddamn nightmare, depending on different gaming groups. But get that to hundreds or thousands of members across continents. This becomes, I don't think, that'd be a full-time job practically to sort that out.
Right.
Anyway.
Now, I ran a living campaign for, was it 2 or 4 years? I'd have to double check.
So living campaign, was it part of the RPGA, or how do you, when you say I ran a living campaign, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I ran Star Wars Living Force.
Oh.
For years. And that was derived out of the D20 version of Star Wars. That's when Wizards of the Coast had it.
Okay.
And not West End Games. It was D20. And that had a document that outlined all of the rules, and there was lots of... So what they did was they released modules in a 3-episode kind of order.
Kind of like a Paizo Adventure Path.
It is, but
if the only reason I'm saying this because listeners may be more familiar with that versus. Right.
So that would be how they launched them, and then they had maybe we should mention like what the components are of organized play, which is you have the governance piece,
yes,
which outlines and stipulates like character creation.
It basically it kind of, I've jokingly said it chessifies your RPG insofar as it is a series. As I said earlier, it's trying to codify and make sure that you have as consistent of an experience as possible. So that's the whole idea of that governance. Wrap that around it so it's a consistent experience.
Right, yes. That's what it facilitates.
Yep. So it does that. So that's the governing body. What else is part of it?
You will typically have some type of incentive,
Okay.
right? You'll have an incentive on the player side, and you may have incentive on the game master side. So if you run so many adventures, they don't want to exclude game masters from getting something out of it.
Oh, there's dice bags, there's maps, there's...
Well, some will get experience points that they can apply to their own characters.
Correct. Yep. I've heard about that. Yep.
Right. So if you've run an adventure, and many will only say like you can only go through the adventure once. So if you run it, you can't go through it. So having run it, you have gone through it. So you might as well get the experience for having run it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. May stipulate the types of books that you can use.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. That's... Yeah, it's trying again. Yeah.
Now, and then
putting boundaries up, just
yes,
making
right.
sure everything's in a box.
Yes. And then it will also stipulate the timeline and maybe the setting. And I mean setting as in, where it geographically is happening.
Well, I mean, yeah, you take a place like the Forgotten Realms, it's a big goddamn planet.
Right.
Where is it happening? If you take a thing like an intellectual property like Star Wars, when in the canonical timeline is this occurring? What is not allowed to happen from a timeline breaking thing? You cannot go back in time and kill Anakin Skywalker and knock that shit off. Right? What are your boundaries? What cannot get away with within that? Okay, that makes sense.
Shadowrun does it they have different seasons, and then each season takes place, I believe, in different locations. So I believe the most recent one is taking place in Chicago, that geographic area. So, of course, with that comes, different things you might run into, different factions. Even with Living Greyhawk, when Living Greyhawk was around, it was all divvied up by physical geographic locations. So Wisconsin was always part of Ferundy or something. I don't even remember.
I think it was it Jeff?
It's the green and white. I can't remember.
I can't remember offhand either.
The Dakota. I know the Dakota Arms, but I don't recall what area Greyhawk. And then what happens is if you went to a different part of the country, they were probably running a different area of Greyhawk, which your character could be incorporated and take place outside of their normal country.
Got it.
In game, right? So it was kind of that dynamic. So setting, so rules, treasure.
The other thing that it brings, and this is kind of, how do I say it? It's not like a rules boxy thing. One of the things that I believe it tries to bring in the organized play that I've read, and I was just checking out that Chaosium did have an organized play thing. I don't know if it's still running. Last thing I remember seeing
Cult
from was
of Chaos.
Cult of Chaos. Last thing I saw was like in 2016, so I don't know if it's still active or kicking. Somebody out there may play it and knows more about it than I do offhand. Anyhow, one of the things that it does is when you're playing Adventures League, you normally love D&D. The guys who are really into it, you're going to get some stinkers, some guy or some gal is running the game, they suck, or you get some jerk of a player. But if you're playing like a Star Trek, Modiphius has a living Star Trek game. I'm just checking some of the notes that Sean had thrown out here. Pathfinder Society. If you're into this, one of the things it does is it brings a group of people together who really enjoy the property.
Right, true.
And one of the cool parts about that is if you show up at a convention and you're like, I want to play and I want to have, it's not a fixed or a canned experience. I just want to know what to expect, right? So if you sit at Sean's game, they say, well, I've never played Savage Worlds before. And Sean goes, anybody here know how to play Savage Worlds? We're playing Forget About It. Okay, chuck the book. Let's just go. If you show up at an AL game, everybody there knows D&D. Is the hope, or at least that it draws those people in. If you're playing Shadowrun, organized play, the people there love Shadowrun and they want to play in this environment. And you're not going to run into that person, or you hopefully will not. It lessens the chance, if you will, in a larger perspective, of that person who is only casually into this particular component of the hobby. I just kind of like this game. If you spent the time to level your character up in an AL to level 5, whatever, you're in. I mean, you're buying in to how this functions.
The only stipulation I would say, Brett, is that there are many times when organized play is pretty prevalent at a convention, and if I am maybe I'm Shadowrun curious, then you would go. There are plenty of options to sign up for a Shadowrun organized play event.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do, you don't have to know the rules. You have to have a familiar. You would probably obviously want to know what the game is. But they will have pre-gens that are generated there.
That is important. That's a very important point, which is kind of the counter to what I just said, because I have heard people say to Daniel G, how do I know where to start? How do I get into it? And without understanding that most people that are into the organized play are willing to let you, they have the pre-gens, they can do stuff for you. You will run into some jackass possibly who's like, oh my God, this person doesn't know how to play organized play. Oh, they don't know, they don't understand Cypher, and you're in a Cypher play event, which I think is Numenera for Monty Cook. You don't even know this. You may run into a dick. You could run into that anywhere. It's a gaming con, right? But the people that I've bumped into, I know some guys who came down to GameholeCon a couple years ago, and my buddy signed up for an AO game, and he didn't realize it was an AO game. He sat down and went, oh my God, I don't know the AO rules. Oh, this is going to fucking suck. They're probably going to kick me off the table. He told me I was half packing up my stuff. The game master says something wrong. He said, I've never played Adventures League before. I'm really sorry. He goes, no problem. I got 4 characters here. What do we got? And they went around the table. Do you mind playing a cleric or a wizard? We could really use them. No, I'll play a wizard, sure. And he was in. He had a good time. The whole table went, dude, yeah, no. Don't, you're not going anywhere. You want a game? We got characters, man. Don't you worry. I've heard other people have horrible experiences, but at any gaming convention, you could have horrible experiences. But I love that story simply because it was interesting to me, because I personally thought, if I don't know this thing, if I'm not into it, if I go to the con, they won't accept me because they're already bought in. They spend all this time. They're never going to take a newbie in, which is goofy because I've been doing this since 3rd grade. I'm in my 40s. And I look at, I'm just a new guy. Well, no, you're not. Get in there, man. And so anyway, your point, Sean, is that these groups, a well-run, organized play, allows for the new person who's Shadowrun curious, Pathfinder Society interested, Shadowrun adjacent. I want to try that. They're ready to help. So that's kind of cool.
Well, the whole purpose of organized play is to keep the game, to promote the game, to get people to join the game, whatever it is that.
Oh, it's a marketing mechanism.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
At some point, I have this thing, and I'm giving out prizes of some kind, be they physical or ephemeral insofar as their experience points for you to spend on your character or whatever, or a first glimpse at a PDF of something, whatever they're doing. It makes you invested in the property. And being invested in a property means I'm spending money on said property, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good marketing approach for gamers because it gets people to play the goddamn game.
And many will stipulate that you need one of the books to probably take part in the game. Not necessarily, but I mean, everything in Pathfinder Society for Paizo is free online. All the rules, it's open source. But, I think in order to reference something on your sheet, there may be, a requirement. You got to have the book at the table or what have you. Don't quote me on that. But anyways, so we mentioned the rules, the character creation, the award system, incentives, the setting, where it takes place, what the timeline is. So why would somebody want to explore organized play? Brett hinted at, maybe you're curious. So that was one reason. Mm-hmm. What other reasons why?
Well, the other one I mentioned was like-minded people, gamers who enjoy the same property and components that you do. If you're a Forgotten Realms nut and you find, back when Living City, Ravensbluff was in the Realms, awesome. When Living City was in Greyhawk, people were like, fuck yeah, Greyhawk's back. They were in it and they love that. If it's Modiphius's Star Trek adventure stuff and their living campaign, you love Star Trek. This is a great place to meet other people who totally freaking groove on Star Trek. So there's the passion for the property and the adventures in that space. I think the consistency is big insofar as if you are playing a thing. We've talked about this before. Not everybody wants to have a bait and switch campaign. Not everybody wants to do different things all the time. There are lots of gamers who love Dungeons and Dragons, and that's what they like to play. Sean and I have I work with the one guy, John, now, and they're finally changing from Pathfinder to 5e just to change it up a little bit. But he played Pathfinder forever, and that was the only game they played. He was literally unaware of other games that were similar to Pathfinder because they paid no attention to them. They paid no heed at all. And that's nothing wrong with that. That's his fun, and he's having a hell of a good time doing it. So, anyway, I think, where the hell am I going with this? The consistency, I think, draws certain people in. I know if I show up at this convention, especially, and I want to play some D&D, with a group of people, like-minded, I understand the system, I know what the general rules are, I don't have to worry about Brett doing some weird-ass house rule that, oh yeah, I do instant death on a double one, sorry you died. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Everything, not everything, but most things are codified. They've got the right stuff around it to help ensure a consistent and repeatable type of experience. So I think that draws people too. At least it would to me. If I was into that thing, that would draw me to it.
Yes. There is a little bit of, I want to collect all the things.
Oh, totally. You watched at GameHoCon, we saw the people that are into True Dungeon. The men and women with bandoliers, literally like 4-inch wide, 6-inch wide bandoliers across their chests and back, loaded with the pogs that they use to play that game with. They want to collect them all. And there are people, and a negative I've heard about organized play is it feels grindy. It feels like all I'm trying to do is level up. All I'm doing is blah. Which to me, I'm like, well, if that's what you think, then it's probably not your environment. But if you like advancing, with this, like, hey, I went through 5 of these, I'm now level 4. I went through 3 more, I'm now level 6. I went through here to here to here. There's a level of, I would call it predictability, and probably somebody will be a little cranky at me for that, but I think there's a predictable component to it that people enjoy. And I'm taking this from people I've talked to.
And there's usually a meta plot. Also, there's an overarching plot that's usually taking place, not always, but usually. They're tied together throughout the timeline. Adventurers.
I'm going to break in right there. So, just a second. When you're in AL, and like, hey, Ravenloft is back. There's entire Ravenloft scenarios going out there.
Yes.
If you love the property and want to be in on like the bleeding edge of what they're talking about, they hit AL first. Like
all the major books are AL
compatible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the stuff they're doing all funnels towards that because they're supporting the play.
Right.
And I would love to believe that is a lot of what the organized play people are doing. Anything if it's cool and going on, much like we're trying to do with our patrons, they want to give that type of insight to the people who are supporting the product that heavily.
Right. You can buy adventures usually, so I think they're like just under $4 for Shadowrun. I think they're about $5 for Pathfinder Society. They used to do back in the day where they were like free adventures. You could just download them. Then you got people trying to create content and they're not getting paid for it. And frankly, you get a wishy-wash of quality that way. Mm-hmm. So I think, having adventures for $3 or $4 or $5 isn't a bad thing. And most people will offset that. Either the con will get it, and they can disseminate it, or the whole game group may chip in a couple bucks each, mm-hmm. and then, buy it for the game master to go and buy it. Sometimes tenacious game masters that have deep pockets will just go out and buy certain adventures and just run them. So that's one thing. So if you are interested in organized play, the first thing that you will want to do is go to the Organized Play website and then find the reference document that they have. They usually have some type of document that will outline everything that you need to know about organized play, like we mentioned. How to create a character, There's also reporting sometimes that is involved. So that way there's a central repository of how things are. I don't know if it's as stringent as it used to be. It used to be where it'd be like, okay, I got to report all this. It goes up to the central website. They keep track of all that stuff.
And some of that's game mastering versus playing, right? Sometimes players get away with, as we jokingly Sean, like, goddamn players. Sometimes they get away with all they have to do is show up and play. Or game masters need to provide data sometimes, or both. I don't know enough about the different components.
Yeah, they don't do it as much anymore because it used to be tied, at least with Wizards, it used to be tied to your DCI number, and so you could actually track what, and Pathfinder had the same similar, you'd register your character, and then when you would get experience points, all that would be online. So literally, if you went to a game table and the game master wanted to look up a character to make sure you were legit with some of the things that you had, they just could pull it up online. Now, I don't remember ever doing that. And I don't remember how prolific that feature was, but nonetheless, I know I had to report some of that stuff.
The other thing I'll tell people, and it's goofy, but I talked to a bunch of people who played. I talked to Jared Rasher when he played at Gamehole Con. Everybody comes out, hey, how'd your game go? When I talk to people at Con, I played AL. How'd it go? Well, I had a good table. I had a bad table. When you ask people what their experience is, what you need to understand is that if you talk to Brett and Brett says it was the dumbest goddamn thing ever, the game master sucked, I think everything about it, when people start using broad sweeping statements about all of this is terrible, no one in that group is any good. All those AL players, all of that group, when people start grouping things in broad sweeping things, I usually start to smile and nod and click. I turn off this is serious intake for me to worry about. Jared, to his credit, when Jared Rash was talking to me about something he had, it was very specific about the game master's approach. It was very specific about the way the table had handled some problems. I'm like, okay, that was an interesting component to talk about, as opposed to that type of play sucked. Everybody who does that, because, as we all know, the internet is a magnet for places, and people love to complain, myself included. So, if you talk to people, after you've done your research, look online, check it out. After you've done your research, if you do choose to talk to people, if you put out a blanket statement online that says, what do you guys think about organized play? You will get a plethora of horseshit responses that is useless to you. If you know anybody you trust who does it, ask them. Talk to different people if you want to. That's totally fine. But I would caution you for taking every negative thing you get, because you're going to get more negatives than positives, most likely out of people, because people love to bitch, especially online. Take that shit with a grain of salt. Try it. If you're interested in it, do not let somebody like Brett or Sean dissuade you from saying, it's not for me. That statement's okay. But still, don't let me dissuade you. If you think it'd be fun to try that Shadowrun thing, I encourage you to try it. And come back and say, Brett, it was awesome. It was one of the best experiences I ever had. I could say, you know what? It just doesn't sound like fun for me, but I am super pumped that you had a damn good time doing it. So, again, it's just a piece that I want to say, because I think it's important, because I hear a lot of down-talking about that stuff, and I don't think it's appropriate.
Right. So, yeah, make sure you explore it a bit and get your own opinion about it. There, like Brett said, it's a dynamic it could just change. You could have a good game master, bad game master. You could have good fellow players at the table, bad fellow players. It's just the adventure may not be written that well. So just take it with a grain of salt. But go get the reference document where you can find it online. We've got a few links in the show notes to some other organized play games. So Brent mentioned the Modiphius. We'll get into die roll in a second. Actually, we'll just hold on. So check out the reference doc. Then what you want to do is find out where they may actually be held, or can you run them at home? Do you need to buy the adventures? So once you get into the reference doc, it's going to tell you a little bit about that, where to go, what you're going to be dealing with. And then there is usually, with a governing body, a point of contact. So then you can email the organizer or the company or whoever is in charge of overseeing that organized play and pose any questions. Some have online forums that they may pose those, tell you to go and post questions too, and people will chime in with answers. But I think that's a good way to consider it and look at it. Anything else from you, Brett, on this?
No, man, I think it's interesting. I've said this before, and it really is not a thing I'm overly interested in. It's just not. However, I have seen people in the organized play rooms having a tremendous amount of fun. I've talked to people who play it who just freaking love it. They love running it. They love playing it. I talked to Doc, and that dude, I shit you not, will run 20-plus hours of AL, and he loves every minute of it. I see him at Gary Con, I see him at Game Home, I'm like, dude, how do you do that? He goes, Brett, I love it. I just fucking love it.
Yeah.
It's so much fun for me. And he's a hell of a game master by all accounts, and he loves doing it. And I think there's some really cool stuff about being able to do things with your home group and then be able to have portability to go to conventions and so forth. So if it's something you think is interesting, or even if you try it, the cool thing is, especially if it's a game you already play Pathfinder and you try, you go, I don't like it. The Society people are going to hunt you down and drag you back into the Pathfinder Society games. Just stop. You don't have to do it. You can play AL. You can play whatever and give it a go and say, you know what? I played a whole season. I played 2 cons. I played 16 games. I'm done. Legit. You can totally do that and not even feel bad. So anyway, there we go.
So why would you want to? 1 is because you're looking for a game. 2, you want to run games. And 3, maybe it's a place to start in order to find a home game or a game group.
Exactly.
Is usually some of the big reasons. Or you just want to play, and you want to play with different people, and you want to be able to go to conventions and use the same character in different games. Those are some of the reasons that you want to check out Organized Play. So if you have any questions, comments, let us know. You know the deal. Let's get into die roll. Right. All right, die roll. Brett, what do you got?
So my biggest one, I have been working with the Encoded Design crew with my Avalon Kickstarter. As soon as that hits, I will be blasting, posting links and so forth. That's my biggest push. So obviously, much like the Patreon, I would love it if BSers would support it. But I am going to tell you right now, if you bump into me at a con, you say, you know what, Brett, it just wasn't interesting to me. I'll say, hey, that's cool. Thank you for thinking about me. Totally fine. So from me to you, the men and women that listen to us, I promise you, I will not take it personally if I don't see the roster of every patron, everyone who's ever written in. If I look and I go, I don't see Blake Ryan's name here. God, I'm picking on you, Blake, but I honestly do not care. If it's not your cup of tea, it's not. And much like Organized Play, totally cool, man. If it's not the type of fun you're looking to have, I don't mind. So don't feel like you got to do it just for Brett. If it's interesting to you and you want it, I encourage you and I will thank you. If you don't, all good, man. John, over to you.
All right. So as I mentioned earlier, the Organized Play links that we'll have in the show notes, D&D Adventurers League is the big one. Modiphia's Star Trek Adventures Living Campaign. So check that out. There's Cypher Play for Numenera from Monty Cook. There's Pathfinder Society by Paizo. Chaosium we mentioned a little bit, Cult of Chaos, but I don't know if it's still going. We'll double check into that. Shadowrun Missions for Shadowrun and Catalyst Games. And then one that I mentioned that I haven't mentioned was Game Base 7's Sparks. Somebody mentioned that. I can't remember who it might have been. But they are an actual organization, I think, out of Ohio, that has their own D6 Star Wars that they've been running for, God, man, it must be over 10 years now. So they come up with the own adventures and everything else and the rules, and then they run it at cons all the time. So if you ever get a chance to check them out, by all means do that. EN World also has a living campaign. So Rollick Earbiter from Reddit posted that. I will post a link to that in die roll because EN World has their own set of Living World stuff in a forum there that you can check out as well. But there's tons that we didn't list. We didn't mean to exclude anybody. It was just the ones that we came to and put them up on the site. So if you have more, point it out. We'll put it up for everybody to know about. Sound good?
Sounds totally good, man. That was good stuff.
So that wraps up this episode. What are we talking about next week, Brett?
Well, next week, you said you want to talk about Kids on Bikes versus Tales from the Loop.
Yeah.
So I am going to have to quiz the shit out of you because I know fuck all about both of those games, dude.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a good time. So if you've never heard of those, that's what we're going to be talking about on the next episode of Gaming NBS. Well, other than that,
I think we're good. Let's move it out.
well, I'm your host, Sean.
And I'm Brett. Good night and good game and all.
This episode of Gaming NBS brought to you with the help from the following BSers. Graham Minert, Corey Wynn, Brian Kurtz, Larry Hout, Mark Tasaka, Pure Mongrel, C.W. Mellencamp, Chris Steele, Ron Bishop, Thomas Hook, Wayne Humfleet, Craig, Brandon Barnes, Laramie Wall, Dan LaValle, Jason Hobbs, Michael Drescher, Sky, Roger Braslett, John Hammersley, Old School DM, Perry Besor, Michael Dinos, Jim Fitzpatrick, Matt Cyberlick, Lord Tentacle, Corey Welch, Kyle Winter, Mirko Froelich, Joe Swick, Curtis Takahashi, Josh Wallace, and Kevin Lovecraft. For ways to support the show, head over to gamingnbs.com/support-us. Thanks, BSers!
This has been a Litterbox Studio production.